My name is Jody Beckstein. I'm 35 and I'm a single mother and a widow. I met my late husband, Ben Beckstein, on a blind date, but we were set up with different people. And after we realized that wasn't going to work out, he called me and asked if I wanted to go on a date with him. That was in the fall of 1992. We married in April of 1994. By the end of that month, we were moving to Norfolk, Virginia, which was his next duty station because he was in the Navy. In September of 95, I found out I was pregnant with our first child, and we were both very excited. He was in Cuba on the ship, and I was at home in Norfolk. About a month later, we found out that my father had passed away, so he came home to be with me and then just remained because they were going to be going back out on the ship for another cruise in a few months. So he just did some shore duty, and we got to spend a few months together that he normally would have been away. In December of 1995, Ben was killed in a car accident. I was 18 weeks pregnant with my daughter at the time. I decided to move to Atlanta, Georgia, where Ben's family was, to be during the rest of my pregnancy. In January of 96, while actually looking for a doctor, I was visiting a hospital in Atlanta and started bleeding very heavily. So they took me to the emergency room and they discovered that I had what's called a placental abruption. So a lot of stuff going on. I was bleeding, I was scared, worried about losing the baby. People were telling me I'd be fine. Some people were telling me we were going to have to either deliver the baby then via C-section, or they could do like what they do with some abortions. I had other family members telling me, irregardless, she needs to be prayed for by a priest because Ben's family was Catholic and she was going to purgatory. Just a lot of crazy things, emotions going on. They sent me home because I chose not to do anything, just to let nature take its course. I ended up bleeding slightly the rest of the pregnancy, but kept her within 2 weeks of her regular due date. She was due to be born on May 22nd, 1996, and I had her on May 9th. My mother and sister and brother were all there. Ben's family drove in to be there. My brother went into the operating room with me to have her, so I had someone with me at the time. He got sick and ended up leaving halfway through it. So much for being a hardcore Marine. My mother, unbeknownst to me at the time, had been diagnosed with breast cancer again. So she could be with Brenna. She chose not to have chemotherapy right away. So she spent the first 6 months of Brenna's life being the second caregiver. She would feed Brenna at night while I pumped for more bottles, and she would take turns with me changing diapers and doing all that. She was the father figure for the first 6 months. It happened like that for about a year, off and on. My mother stayed with me, but she started chemo. And when she was in chemo, I kept Brenna away from her. In the fall of 97, I moved to Orlando to work for Walt Disney World. And my mother went into hospice. She passed away on October 20th, 1997. I was already living and working in Orlando. My stepfather passed away in February 1998. He had been an alcoholic my entire childhood. Stopped drinking when I was a freshman or sophomore in high school. Once my mother passed away, he started drinking again, and just his liver and stomach gave out on him, and he passed away in that February. The years 1995 to 97, 98 were really rough. I was really young. I had Brenna when I was 22. So to lose a husband and father, stepfather, and mother, all in a span of 2-3 years was a lot. And having Brenna, I think, was the only light in that time period. I was still of the mindset that I was me and her against the world. They had told me not to get pregnant, that I probably shouldn't get pregnant, that I would most likely have complications. But I did anyway, and I think that was for a reason. That's what sustained me through the darkest times. And even though she's 13 and having a teenager makes you want to pull your hair out, she keeps me going and reminds me of my past, because even though she's my future, she reminds me of people that are gone, that people I meet from this day forward will never know and know how they touch me. She's that connection to those people and to my past.